The year is 1184 BCE, and the Greeks have been sitting outside the walls of Troy for 10 goddamn years because some prince named Paris couldn't keep it in his pants and decided to steal another guy's wife. A decade. That's longer than most marriages last today, and these idiots spent it accomplishing absolutely nothing except dying of dysentery and wondering if maybe this whole war over Helen thing was getting a bit ridiculous. But then someone had an idea so batshit insane, so monumentally stupid that it actually worked and changed warfare forever. They built a giant wooden horse, stuffed it with soldiers, and convinced their enemies it was a gift. And the Trojans, these people who'd successfully defended their city for 10 years, looked at this obvious trap and said, yeah, let's wheel that fucker inside our walls. So let's establish what's happening here. Troy is this insanely wealthy city in what's now Turkey, sitting pretty on trade routes and basically telling everyone else in the Mediterranean to go fuck themselves. They've got walls that would make Donald Trump weep with envy. We're talking 30 feet high, thick as a modern highway, and absolutely impenetrable to Bronze Age siege technology. The Greeks have been trying everything. Battering rams, scaling ladders, strongly worded diplomatic letters, probably a few very polite requests to just surrender already. Nothing works. The Trojans just laugh from their walls, probably eating grapes and having a lovely time while Greeks die of plague in their camps. This siege has dragged on so long that soldiers who started as young men now have teenagers back home they've never met. The sunk cost fallacy is in full effect. They can't leave because they've already wasted a decade, but they also can't win because walls are apparently really fucking effective when you don't have gunpowder. Enter Odysseus, king of Ithaca and history's patron saint of fuck it, let's try something completely insane. This guy is basically if a used car salesman and a philosophy professor had a baby who then read The Art of War while doing shrooms. He's the one Greek commander who's looked at this 10-year clusterfuck and thought, you know what? We're thinking about this all wrong. While everyone else is trying to break through the walls, Odysseus proposes they just don't. Build a giant wooden horse, and it has to be a horse because horses are sacred to Poseidon and the Trojans are really into that religious symbolism stuff. Fill it with soldiers, leave it outside the gates, sail away like you're giving up, and wait for the Trojans to drag your Trojan horse, get it, inside themselves. The other Greek commanders probably looked at him like he'd suggested they all try interpretive dance as a military strategy. But after 10 years of failure, stupid idea that might work starts looking better than smart idea that definitely won't. So they actually build this thing, and just imagine the logistics meeting for that project. Okay guys, we need to build a horse, a wooden horse, big enough to hide, let's say, 30 to 40 fully armed soldiers inside without them dying of heat stroke or stabbing each other in the cramped darkness. It needs to look like a religious offering, not an obvious military weapon, so make it pretty. Add some decorative elements. Maybe some wheels so the Trojans can actually move it because we're not going to be there to help and it's going to weigh several tons. Oh, and we need to finish this before the Trojans notice we're building a giant wooden horse instead of, you know, fighting a war. They somehow pull it off. Ancient Greek engineers were apparently really fucking good at their jobs when properly motivated by desperation and the prospect of going home before they died of old age. The finished product is massive, hollow, and has a trapdoor in the belly because subtlety is dead and Odysseus killed it. Now comes the hard part, selling it. The Greeks load their best warriors into the horse's guts. We're talking Odysseus himself, Menelaus, the cuckolded husband who started this whole mess, and a bunch of other guys who are really hoping this works because being stuck inside a wooden horse while your enemies examine it is a spectacularly shitty way to die. Then the rest of the Greek army does the most dramatic we give up performance in military history. They burn their camps, board their ships, and sail away to a nearby island where they can watch from a distance. But, and this is the genius evil part, they leave behind one guy. A plant. A Greek soldier named Sinon who's either the bravest or dumbest man alive, depending on how this turns out. His job is to get captured by the Trojans and sell them the most elaborate lie in ancient history, that the horse is a sacred offering to Athena. The Greeks built it too big to fit through Troy's gates on purpose, so the Trojans couldn't steal the blessing. And they totally definitely sailed home for real this time. Not joking, war's over, everyone can relax now. The Trojans find the horse and immediately split into two camps, people who aren't fucking idiots and everyone else. Team Not Idiots is led by Latacz, a priest who takes one look at this situation and says the most famous unheeded warning in history: "I fear Greeks even when they bring gifts." This man literally says it's a trap in the most eloquent way possible, then throws a spear at the horse to prove it's hollow. He is 100% correct. The Trojans should listen to him. They should burn the horse, check for Greeks, and maybe institute some basic security protocols. Instead, the gods, who are apparently on Team Chaos, send two giant sea serpents to strangle Laocoon and his sons to death in front of everyone. The Trojans, watching a man die horribly for suggesting caution, interpret this as the gods are angry we doubted the gift, rather than, holy shit, maybe that guy was onto something. Meanwhile, Shinon is selling his story, probably sweating bullets, and the Trojans are buying it completely. They literally tear down part of their own wall to get the horse inside because it won't fit through the gates, which, and I cannot stress this enough, was exactly what Shinon said proved it wasn't a threat. So now you've got 30 to 40 Greek warriors sitting in complete darkness inside a wooden horse in the middle of enemy territory, listening to Trojans celebrate around them. It's hot, it's cramped, nobody can talk, someone definitely needs to piss, and if literally anyone makes a sound, they all die horribly. Helen of Troy, the woman whose face launched 1,000 ships and whose vagina apparently had enough diplomatic importance to justify a decade of war, allegedly walks around the horse calling out names of Greek warriors in voices that sound like their wives, trying to get them to reveal themselves. Whether she's testing it because she suspects a trap or just fucking with them for fun is unclear from the sources, but either way, Odysseus has to physically restrain one of his men from responding. This goes on for hours. The Trojans party, celebrate their victory, drink themselves stupid, and finally pass out, while Greeks sit in a wooden horse, probably reconsidering every life choice that led to this moment. Then, in the dead of night, when Troy is asleep and vulnerable for the first time in 10 years, the trapdoor opens. What happens next is genuinely horrific, which is why ancient sources tend to gloss over it with vague language about the sack of Troy. The Greeks emerge from the horse, kill the guards, and open the city gates. The rest of the Greek army, which has sailed back under cover of darkness, pours into the city. Troy, which hasn't been conquered in 10 years of siege warfare, falls in a single night because they brought the enemy inside themselves. The Greeks proceed to do what victorious armies did in the Bronze Age, which is basically every war crime you can imagine and several you probably can't. They kill the men, enslave the women and children, burn the city to the ground, and salt the earth for good measure. King Priam gets murdered at an altar. Hector's infant son is thrown from the walls so he can't grow up to seek revenge. Cassandra, who has spent the entire war accurately predicting disasters that nobody believes, gets dragged from a temple and assaulted. The entire royal family of Troy is either dead or enslaved by sunrise, all because they trusted a gift horse. Now here's the really fucked up part. The Greeks win this war and then proceed to have the worst victory tour in history. Odysseus takes 10 more years to get home and loses his entire crew in the process. Agamemnon, the Greek commander-in-chief, goes home and immediately gets murdered by his wife, who's still pissed about that whole sacrificing our daughter to get favorable winds thing from 10 years earlier. Ajax goes mad and kills himself. Menelaus gets Helen back, and presumably they have the most awkward marriage in history because, honey, remember when your affair caused a 10-year war and got an entire city destroyed? Is not great pillow talk. The gods are angry, the survivors are traumatized, and the victory feels suspiciously like a tragedy. Troy is gone, but the cost is so catastrophic that Greek civilization never fully recovers. The Bronze Age collapses shortly after. Civilizations crumble, and we enter a dark age that lasts centuries. So yes, the Trojan horse worked, but in the congratulations, you destroyed everything including yourselves kind of way. But the Trojan horse becomes immortal precisely because it's so audacious, so perfectly executed, and so catastrophically effective. It becomes the template for every military deception that follows. The phrase Trojan horse enters every language as shorthand for a threat that disguises itself as a gift. Computer viruses use the name because they're malicious code hidden in harmless-looking programs. Same principle, different medium. Every spy operation, every fifth column, every inside job owes something to Odysseus's batshit wooden horse plan. Military academies still teach it as an example of asymmetric warfare. When you can't win with strength, win with deception. The story survives in the Iliad, the Odyssey, Virgil's Aeneid, and 1,000 retellings. because it contains everything that makes humans horrible and brilliant at the same time. We're smart enough to devise elaborate deceptions, dumb enough to fall for obvious traps, and cruel enough to massacre entire cities when we finally get inside the walls. So what's the takeaway from all this Bronze Age carnage? Maybe it's that paranoia is sometimes justified, that gifts from enemies should be thoroughly inspected, or that tearing down your own walls to accommodate a suspicious horse is definitely a bad idea. But really, the Trojan horse endures because it's the perfect crystallization of human warfare. We're so obsessed with winning that we'll try anything, so desperate for victory that we'll believe anything, and so committed to violence that we'll destroy anything. The Trojans lost the 10-year war in a single night because they wanted to believe the war was over. The Greeks won that war and lost everything anyway because victory in ancient warfare was just organized mutual destruction with a winner. 3,000 years later, we're still building Trojan horses. We just call them cyber attacks, misinformation campaigns, and social engineering. We're still falling for them too, because human nature hasn't evolved as fast as our weapons. Somewhere in the ruins of ancient Troy, buried under centuries of dirt and archaeological digs, there's probably a piece of wood from that horse. And if it could talk, it would probably say what Laocoon tried to warn everyone. Beware of gifts. Especially the ones that seem too good to be true. They usually are.